This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, depending on from where you have joined. And my name is JD. I will be the one who will be presenting this seminar, uh, webinar. I'm sorry. So the topic for today is performance domain stakeholder. We all know, all have heard the term stakeholder in your experience as a project manager, right? Or even as an experience as a team member, we would be familiar with the term stakeholder. Now, the word performance domain is something that may be new to you. You might not have heard it. We will explain that as well. But we'll be covering about stakeholder particularly and how PMBOK 7 deals with stakeholders. Okay. Now, before we start, a quick overview about Techcanvass. Right? The Techcanvass is a PMI authorized training partner. So we are authorized to provide PMP trainings and other project management trainings from PMI. We are also an IABA endorsed education provider. So we also provide business analyst trainings, certification trainings, particularly like ECBA, CCBA, CBAP, AAC, CABA, and CPOA. Right? Now, apart from that, we are also into domain trainings. So we have full-fledged LMS where we have question banks for respective trainings, where aspirants can practice their various questions across various chapters and various topics, right? And we also have full-length simulation exams where the actual exam is simulated for you to experience a mock before you attend your certification exams. We also have flashcards and crossword puzzles for you to check your knowledge when you're preparing for the exams, right? So we are into professional certification trainings. So that's about Techcanvass. And about me, my name is JD, and I am one of the project management instructors from Techcanvass. I have more than 15 plus years of experience in the industry, and more than 14 years is into project management, right? So I am PMI authorized PMP instructor, right? I'm certified in PMP, Agile certified practitioner, certified Scrum Master, and during my good old programming days, I used to be a Microsoft certified solution developer. That's about me. Let's quickly get into the topic, right? Now, who will benefit from this webinar? Those of you who are planning to get certified on PMP, you're definitely going to get benefited from this webinar. Or if you are playing the role of a project manager in your organization, you may not be targeting PMP as of now, right? You may be playing the role of a project manager. You would have some takeaways from today. Very importantly, if you are aspiring to become a project manager, you would find it even more useful, in my opinion. Okay. Now, what is the agenda for today, right? Now we'll start by understanding where did this word performance domain come from, right? We'll start with what is PMI, what is PMBOK exam, and then what is performance domain and all that, right? And then we'll talk about who is a stakeholder, right? And then the importance of engaging and communicating with stakeholders in projects. And from PMBOK 7 perspective, we'll try to understand what are models, methods, and artifacts, and how can you use them to manage stakeholders effectively in your project, right? And then we'll end up with a question and answer session. Before you go directly to the topic, right? Let's do some groundwork as to from where has the term performance domain come. So we need to understand who are PMI. PMI stands for Project Management Institute. Okay, so they were founded in 1969. They are a non-profit organization, and they are a non-profit professional membership based organization, right? So what do they specialize in, right? Every non-profit organization, they specialize in something. PMI specializes in, as you might have guessed by now, project, program, and portfolio management. Now underneath this umbrella you have many flavors, like you have risk management. So they specialize in risk management as well. They specialize in agile scrum master roles, value stream consulting, agile coaching, right? So they specialize under a lot of things under this umbrella. Now, particularly what stands with PMI is their expertise in project management, particularly project management. They are well known around the world, right? So in other words, PMI on a regular frequent intervals, they gather best practices in project management, guidelines, standards that are followed across the industry, and then they compose everything into a single artifact or book called PMBOK guide, right? So most of the companies who would like to understand what are the uh, proven best practices in project management as a domain or project management as a practice, they do refer to PMBOK. PMBOK stands for Project Management Body of Knowledge, and we'll go through what it exactly contains, right? And then we'll get into what is a performance domain and stakeholder engagement and all that. Okay, so what exactly is PMBOK 7, right? So as I mentioned, it is a composition of best practices, standards, guidelines, and principles in project management, which is in practice in the industry, right? It's just not just theory, which is being practiced by the industry. So it happens to be PMI's flagship publication, right? And also, as I mentioned, it is a good resource for effective project management in any industry. It is industry agnostic. I have seen people who benefit on this from construction industry, from the software industry, from healthcare, manufacturing, right? Across industries. Now it has two parts to it: standard, right? Project management standards, and then guide. We'll go through them, what exactly it contains. The latest edition of PMBOK is the 7th edition, which was released somewhere around July last year, 2021. Okay, and it is also very popular as one of the primary reference materials for the PMP exam, right? Since PMI publishes PMBOK 7 and they also uh, are regulating and maintaining the PMP exam, it makes sense that PMBOK 7 is one of the reference materials for the PMP exam. What exactly? Now, if you want to grab a copy of PMBOK guide, you can get a soft copy or a hard copy, right? For soft copy, you need a PMI membership, and once you get a PMI membership, you can download the the PMBOK guide soft copy for free. You also get access to various other body of knowledge guides, right? You also have a program management body of knowledge, portfolio management body of knowledge, and you have various other resources from PMI, which you can download the soft copies for free if you have the PMI membership. Now, if you're really looking for a hard copy of the book, now if you have PMI membership, you would get a solid discount. Otherwise, you would get it as in the price. So what exactly does book contain, right? We understand where it comes from and where it is useful, but what does it contain internally? This book contains two sections. One is the standard for project management, okay, which talks about value delivery system. But today, the world is moving towards principle-based project management, particularly under the agile umbrella, right? The last 5-6 years, there has been an increasing adoption of agile project management, particularly enterprise agile, like scaled agile. So value delivery system is very important. So this book covers that in the first section under standards for project management. And very interestingly, for the first time in their history, PMI has come up with project management principles. Right? So far, PMI's outlook towards project management was more towards a process-based outlook. Now they have come up with principles-based outlook. So they have introduced 12 principles of project management. Very interesting. The second part of the book is nothing but the guide, right? Guide to body of knowledge, project management. What does that contain? That contains the performance domain. We're going to talk about what is performance domain shortly, but you'll find it in the second part of the book. It also talks about tailoring, right? So with the current context in the industries, there is an increasing need for ability to tailor every aspect in project management. Right? You should be able to customize various aspects in project management, be it people management, be it stakeholder management, be it resource, be it scope, schedule, cost, right? So tailoring talks a lot about it. And finally, we have models, methods, and artifacts. Right? So in the context of stakeholders, we'll talk about what are the models, methods, and artifacts that stakeholder will deal with. Okay, we'll talk more about it there. In short, models, methods, and artifacts can be crudely compared to inputs, tools, and techniques and outputs that we had in the earlier versions of PMBOK. Right? Every process had an input, the process had a tools and technique, and then it had an output. There is something similar to that on the same lines. Now, what is new in this 7th edition? And in comparison to the 6th edition of PMBOK, 6th edition of PMBOK was very comprehensive in my opinion, right? Too much comprehensive for how a guide is supposed to be. A guide is supposed to be crisp and straight to the point and try to keep it very generic, but it used to be prescriptive. That is because PMI used to look at project management from a process perspective. Now, 7th edition is, I would say, disruptive change to the way PMI looked at project management. What happened was, if you look at this, right, 6th edition had standard of project management, that was the second part. It had different phases of project like initiation, planning, executing, monitoring, and closing. That became the first part in PMBOK 7th edition. So these 5 process groups, got translated to your principles. You do not have process groups anymore, right? They made it even more flexible in terms of principles. Now, the guide was the first part in 6th edition that got moved as a second section in the PMBOK guide. And then we had knowledge areas in the 6th edition, which got translated to performance domains. Okay, I would say instead of translation, they got reorganized for the better. Okay, you would see a lot of things got repeated in a different way. But performance domains is how you look at various aspects of project management as per the new PMBOK guide. Now, enough of the book. We had a look, we understood what the book contains exactly. Let's get to the topic, right? Today's topic is about stakeholder performance domain. Before understanding stakeholder performance domain, let us understand what is a performance domain and what PMI says is performance domain, right? PMI says a performance domain is a group of activities that are critical for effective delivery of project outcomes. Right? They are interactive, interrelated, and interdependent areas of focus that work in unison to achieve desired project outcomes, right? What does this even mean? What do you need for you to effectively do project management, right? Let us look at it from that way. So PMI has consolidated areas which are needed for effective project management, okay? And they are not on silos. They are going to be interdependent, interrelated, and they interact with each other. And those aspects are called performance domains. Now, what are those aspects, right? So you have stakeholder performance domain, which is the very first. So this webinar that we are doing, we'll be doing one webinar per performance domain, right? Today it is stakeholder. The next webinar would be on team performance domain, right? So stakeholder is what we'll be talking today. Stakeholder is, now in brief, anyone who can impact a project or anyone who can be impacted by a project. I'm putting a very simple and crude definition. The official definition is a bit more complex. We'll get to that. So PMI considers that this is one aspect in project management. Team is a different aspect as well, right? Team is that part of the project that realizes a requirement and provides the deliverables to stakeholders, right? It may be external stakeholders or internal stakeholders. So PMI has separated out and kept a performance domain for team, right? So team is the second important aspect of project management. Very importantly, in earlier PMBOK guides, the development approach of a project from project management perspective or life cycle of a project used to take a backseat, right? So we very popularly had waterfall project management and agile project management. right? So even though even though PMP exam has 50% weightage for both waterfall and agile, the actual PMBOK guide, the development approach took a backseat. It was not a specific knowledge area as such, right? It was part of integration management. Now they have brought into the mainstream, they gave it a front row seat. So development approach and life cycle is also a performance domain. So your development approach covers what methodology are you using, right? Is it waterfall or agile? That is one aspect of it. And within waterfall or agile, what are the sub process, right? The project phases that you are having, right? Initiation, uh, analysis, uh, design, development, whatever sub phases you are defining in your project life cycle, you would like to define that here as well. So this is one such performance domain. And you had planning performance domain, right? They had extracted out everything, and then the typical process groups that we had, they kind of used the same idea here in performance domain. They came up with a planning performance domain, right? Typically, what do we do in projects, right? As project managers, we plan and we execute, if you have to put it very simply. So they have extracted out many aspects into planning. Now you get stakeholder planning also comes under that, your resource planning, your scope, schedule, everything comes under planning. Now the next two performance domains are quite interrelated, right? The actual work that you do to realize the requirements, that is the project work, and the delivery of the deliverables to the stakeholders, customers, or end users, right? So they are exclusively brought out as performance domains. And while you are performing or executing your project, when you are doing your project work and delivery, you need to measure. So again, from project management perspective, what do you measure, right? You measure whether you are as per plan, right? What was the original plan? Where do you stand? It may be schedule, it may be cost, it may be quality, but you are measuring the execution against plan, right? So this performance domain deals with various metrics that you use in order to track the project, particularly project execution. Right? And then finally, out of total 8 performance domain, the last performance domain is uncertainty. Uncertainty deals with areas like risk, right? It's very important in project management. It is always recommended that project managers start risk management right from day one. The risks, complexity, right? All of this comes under uncertainty. How do you manage that? Now today's focus on topic would be stakeholder in today's webinar. Now while I'm going through this, if you have any questions, you can always put your question in the chat window. Okay, I'll try to answer that as soon as I notice your question. Now let's get into the topic. We now understand that what is a performance domain. Now, if we have to put it simply, performance domain is an aspect of project management that contributes towards the final delivery of the project, right? And we have also identified that stakeholder is also one of the 8 performance domains from PMBOK 7th edition. Now, can any of you may put it in the chat window, you can tell it in the call, tell me, who do you think is a stakeholder in a project? I'm not looking for standard definitions. Whatever comes to your mind when you hear the word stakeholder. Project sponsor, that's a good one from Alam Mohammed. Megha Agarwal says business, absolutely, yes. Saujanya says anyone who will be impacted by the project. Customers is a very good example. End user also stakeholders, agree. Okay, these are good answers. Now let me share with you the official definition. Yeah, Saujanya also adds partner teams. Very good, right? Sometimes we partner, we contract out work and get things done. So partner teams are also stakeholders. Now official definition says, we'll go through official definition and we'll look at a more simpler definition, right? Official definition says an individual, group, or organization that may affect or be affected by, right? Let me remove the lines. I will highlight. These people who may affect the project or who may be affected uh, by the project or perceive themselves to be affected by a decision. Let me say project, right? A decision, activity, or outcome of a project is called a stakeholder. Now, if you look at answers that I received as well, right? All of them are qualified to be called a stakeholder, right? A project sponsor is a stakeholder because he has the authority to affect a project. Business, same, right? Customers and users, they are affected by the project. They are getting a deliverable, which is going to change their life. Partner teams, right? They are benefiting from the project. So, in other words, if I have to put it even more simple definition, a stakeholder is someone who affects or is affected by the project. It may be your customers, end users, your senior management, right? Your own team members are stakeholders because they are impacting the project. You yourself as a project manager are a stakeholder because you are also impacting the project. Okay, this is a standard definition. It makes sense in real world scenario as well, right? So what is the role of a project manager here, right? A project manager must identify stakeholders, analyze stakeholders, engage them, and monitor them continuously, right? It is not as simple as managing stakeholders. You have certain sequence, right? And there is a reason why we have that sequence. Identifying, let's go through step one by one, right? Identifying stakeholders is crucial because you do not want to slip out any stakeholders from your list. It's very crucial, right? And then analyzing stakeholders is also crucial. Once you identify stakeholders, not all stakeholders are the same, right? Different stakeholders have different influences, different power, different interest in your project, different impact. You may want to deal with different stakeholders differently, right? That's why you need to analyze them first after you identify them and then engage with them, right? So once you start the engagement process, all you need to do is monitor for any new stakeholders and any change in engagement, change in analysis of the stakeholders. This is a cycle of how do you handle stakeholders as a project manager. Now let's try to get into depth of all this, right? How do you do all this as a project manager? First thing is identification. So how do you identify stakeholders in your project? There are two popular techniques for identification. There are many other techniques as well. We'll talk about two of them here. One is a project manager's sphere of influence. As a project manager, who can influence you and who is that you can influence? Okay. Primarily, you have stakeholders like suppliers, customers, and end users, right? So they're typically outside the organization, right? Suppliers are nothing but contractors or vendors, right? And service providers, whatever you call them. Customers, end users, they're all from outside the organization. They can influence you and you can influence them. They're also stakeholders. You need to identify them. Who are they in your project? Okay, the inner layer is your organization. Within your organization and outside your project, who can influence you or who can be influenced by you? Project sponsors, right? As one of you said, governing bodies and steering committees, right? Most cases, both are going hand in hand. Like your senior management, your sponsor, the team that typically does the governance of your project. Your project management office is also a stakeholder because they can influence your project through means of consulting, support, auditing, compliance, and all those things. Now, within the organization, within your project, or at par with your project level, right? Your project team is a stakeholder. Every team member in your project contributing to the project is a stakeholder. And then you have peer managers, right? Your peer managers are also helping you directly or indirectly. Many a times, you as a project manager will talk with your peer project managers to understand what are the best practices they are doing. You don't want to reinvent the wheel, right? They might have identified good estimation techniques, better efficient way of achieving things. They are helping you out directly and indirectly. So you need to have good network with them. So they are also technically stakeholders. Very importantly, resource managers, right? You may not be hiring team members in a project all the time. Many a times you'll be borrowing them from your resource pool in your organization. So you are also dependent on resource managers in positively influencing your project. So they are also stakeholders. And last but not the least, your project manager is also a stakeholder. So if I have to identify stakeholders in my project, I would go to every layer and I'll start naming them in my list. Now, where do you list your stakeholders? We'll talk about it. There is a document for that. We'll look at an example. But this is one technique, right? Identifying stakeholders through sphere of influence. The second technique is directions of influence. Directions of influence is, if you are the project manager, it's similar to spheres of influence. Spheres of influence was unidirectional. It's coming from top to bottom. Now this is 360 direction. This 360 degree. If you look at it that way, it repeats the same thing. If you are the project manager in the center, you will be interacting with your peer project managers, particularly when it comes to resources, like we spoke in the last slide. To your side, you have them, right? They're stakeholders. Below you, you have the project team who are contributing to the project. Okay, they're also stakeholders. To the right side of you or outward of you, you have suppliers, government. Government are stakeholders, right? Sometimes in your project, you apply government regulations that needs to be followed, right? It is not by choice. It is by for legal means, right? Your business is not legible if you don't follow mandatory government regulations. So government is also stakeholder, and any regulators also, right? And above you, upwards, you have senior management, sponsor, and steering committee. It is similar to spheres of influence, but only that you are not looking from top bottom angle. You are not doing a 360 degree around yourself to identify stakeholders. Now that we have identified stakeholders, what do? We need to analyze them. Like I said before, given a team, project team that reports to you, not all of them are the same, right? You might have noticed that your own team members, even your peer team members, they come from different uh, psychological background, they have different interests, they have different uh, motivating factors, influential factors. A lot of things are different between different people. So if you have 15 or 20 stakeholders in a project, you'll not be able to apply the same people management technique against every stakeholder. You need to understand what are the motivating factors for every stakeholder, what is their level of interest in the project, and their authority, influence, and power in the organization. You need to understand that so that you can handle them in a more efficient way. This entire process is called stakeholder analysis. Stakeholder analysis is, right, analyzing stakeholders. No, it considers several aspects like power, their impact, right, attitude. Attitude is very important. Stakeholders, you might have experienced in your projects that some stakeholders have difficult attitude, but then it is left to your people management skills. How do you positively influence them, right? Their beliefs, expectations from the project. These expectations of stakeholders from the project is also known as requirements, right? We'll talk about it separately in another webinar. We talk about scope or project work. And then you have degree of influence and proximity to the project. And very importantly, finally, interest. So you'll be looking at all these aspects of different stakeholders, right? Typically, you will take a couple of attributes from here and you will measure every stakeholder against the attributes. Now, one such analyzing technique is called Salience Model, right? So you may have different stakeholders in a project. You may want to categorize them. Okay, there are some stakeholders who have influential power, right? Pure power. I'm talking about pure power. They are one set of stakeholders. Now there are also stakeholders who are legitimate to the project, right? So they have valid requirements in their project. So obviously they also have a say in the project decisions. Okay, So they are impacted by the requirements. They provide requirements and they are legitimate in the project decisions, right? So they have same project decisions. And then we have urgency. Urgency is, so sometimes depending on the nature of work, some stakeholders are immediately impacted. You might have seen in projects where some members in the project are actively running behind you. You may be a team member, you may be a project manager, but your work is impacting them in such a way they are in constant state of urgency. That's the nature of their work. They may be from a support team or marketing team, but that's the way your work is impacting them. So your stakeholders can be categorized under these different categories, right? Now, it is not always black and white, right? You may have people with a combination of this, right? For people who have a combination of power and legitimacy, okay, they have power and they are having an active say in the decision of the project because the requirements are legitimate to them. Most probably they are coming from them. Such people are called dominant. Okay. Now, it may be a combination of urgency and legitimacy. That stakeholder has a say in your project. Okay, and he also has urgency behind him on the work that you are doing, but he does not have power. As a result, he is dependent on you as a project manager, right? You will have different tone of communication from them, and very dangerously, we call this dangerous, where a stakeholder may have a combination of authority and urgency, power and urgency. He has power, and he is always having urgent needs from your project, right? Such kind of people will be they are considered dangerous in the sense that they would be the people who would be maximum influencing you, right? Their influence will be direct on you for understandable reasons. And finally, you will have very fewer stakeholders in the organization who have all three. They have power, they have urgency and legitimacy. Mostly from the customer side, the senior management from the customer side has this, and typically they have the final say in any project. Now, the whole exercise here is to understand the how do we classify, analyze stakeholders, right? This is one way of analyzing stakeholders. Right? Where do your stakeholders fall under? Another way is called power versus interest grid, right? So you have four quadrants. In the x-axis, you have interest, and the y-axis, you have power. And then you will put your stakeholders under various quadrants here. For example, if your stakeholder is having low interest and low authority in the organization, now you need to monitor them. Okay, make sure that they do not have any concerns, and just keep monitoring them. And you should constantly try to bring up their interest level higher, but that's why you should deal with them, right? Or they may have high power and low interest. Right? That is kind of an alarming combination: high power, low interest. You need to keep them satisfied so that they slowly move towards here: high power, high interest. Sometimes stakeholders may have low authority in the organization, but they may have high interest in your project, which is very good, right? As long as people have high interest in the project, you need not do anything. You cannot do anything about their power for most of the times. You need not worry about that. All you need to ensure is that your stakeholders have high interest in the project. Okay. And finally, you may have stakeholders who have high power and high interest, which is very good news, but you should constantly manage them closely because they should not lose interest in our project, right? So you need to manage them closely to keep them up in the same quadrant. Okay, this is another stakeholder analysis technique. Now you may want to do this exercise with your project to see who is falling under what quadrant. Okay, now there is one more technique called Stakeholder Cube. Now in your Stakeholder Cube, this is three-dimensional. You have power, interest, you have power, you have interest, and you have attitude as well. Now if you see here, based on different combinations, you have different adjectives being used to describe the stakeholder, right? The person with the highest power, highest attitude, and highest interest is being called influential active backer, right? Now, the person with the lowest power, interest, and lowest attitude is being called insignificant passive blocker. This technique is used rarely, but if you want a three-dimensional analysis of your stakeholders, you can use a combination of this. As I mentioned earlier, attitude is also very important, particularly with people. Your people skills comes into the front to deal with challenging attitude that stakeholders may have. It's open thing, right? You might have experienced it in your own projects that you may have some difficult attitude with some stakeholders. Now, where do you maintain list of stakeholders, right? Now, if you are preparing for the PMP exam, PMBOK recommends the term Stakeholder Register. Okay, that is the official term. You may use a Word document or an Excel sheet, whatever works for you. I use typically Excel sheet to maintain my stakeholder list. Okay, but whatever works for you. Now, this is a simple example here. Is you have the name of the stakeholder for your project. What is his organizational title? Location. In your project, what is the role? Right? And then, of course, contact information. Very important column. Influence. What is the influence of this stakeholder on your project? You have high, low, high, right? Now, this ties back to the power grid, right, that we used. You need to have a close watch on high influence stakeholders. Okay, and then the last column is also very important. You need to also track, are they in favor of your project, right? Do they support your project, right? And the combination of high influence and not a supporter is very vital for you. You need to pay more attention to those stakeholders closely. Okay, that's where this becomes important. Try to understand from them what is their concern and try to address their concern. Now, one of the crucial elements with stakeholders is communication. That's where project managers' communication skills comes into picture. Now, why should we communicate with stakeholders? Two reasons. Keep them engaged and keep them informed. Right? Both will go hand in hand. Right? Engage is, we'll talk about engagement shortly. Inform is nothing but reporting. Right? So when you're engaging stakeholders, there may be different levels of engagement. Okay. Some of the stakeholders, okay, how do you validate your hypothesis being supported, right? Vikram has asked a good question. See, there may be many reasons why a particular stakeholder may be against the outcome of a project, right? For example, I'll take two examples. If that stakeholder is a peer project manager, okay, and if he thinks that let's say we are delivering a software component, our team is delivering a software component, and that project manager thinks that due to this component, his component is going to be impacted in terms of performance. There may be a realistic scenario like that, right? So he may not be exactly a supporter of your project. Okay, there may be political reasons. Now, there may be one more scenario where a senior stakeholder, like a senior management person, may be believing that the benefit that your project is bringing may not be essential for the organization. Now, I have seen such scenarios as well. So there may be different moods, right? When you talk to the stakeholders, you will understand from them, if you read between their lines, whether they are in favor of the project or they are resistant to the project. Now, what should we ideally do, right? We should ideally understand their concern, try to address it. That is the immediate reaction from project manager. So if you see here on the screen, this may be different engagement levels. When you are new to a project, talk to the stakeholders first and classify them. Some stakeholders may be unaware of the project. That can happen. There may be, you know that you need their help in the project, but they do not know what's happening in the project. Some of them don't even know a project exists, right? You need to bring them to a supportive level. Okay. Now, some stakeholders may not be supportive of the project. You need to bring them to supportive level. Some of them may be aware of the project. They're neither supportive nor resistant. It's always safe to bring them to supportive. Never keep stakeholders neutral, because if you keep them neutral, tomorrow they may go towards resistant having concerns, it is better that you proactively understand the concerns from them and bring them to support you, right? And sometimes you need them to drive initiatives. Some of them you may bring them to leading the project itself, right? You yourself are a leading stakeholder as a project manager, isn't it? So like that, you may need some help. You may push them towards leading the project from the front. Yeah. Okay. So typically, to answer your question, Vikram, is when you are given a new project, talk to all the stakeholders. You would get a sense of who is being neutral, who is being supportive, who is being resistant. That neutral and resistant, try to bring them towards supportive. So that's my suggestion. Okay. So that these are different engagement levels, right? Let's see an example. We have 3 stakeholders. For simplicity's sake, just 3 members. Now this sheet that you see, it is called Stakeholder Engagement Assessment Matrix. Okay, it is looking at the engagement levels of different stakeholders. So Harry is unaware about the project. The current engagement level is unaware. Sally currently she is neutral about the project, and Kumar currently he is supportive of the project. What is the desired engagement level for them? You need to mark that. All of them need to be, these both needs to be moved to support. Probably Kumar's help you need in driving some initiatives in your project. That is why you are marking him as the desired engagement level as leading. Okay. This is how you assess the engagement level of every stakeholder and plan for their desired engagement level. This is called Stakeholder Engagement Assessment Matrix. This is one of the techniques used for engaging stakeholders. You also need to plan for communication, right? Just because you have identified stakeholders and you have engagement plan doesn't mean things will fall in line right from day one, right? You need to come up with a communication plan of how you are going to communicate with the stakeholders, right? And typical communication plan will have many sections to it. Okay, but let us quickly go through it. What is the expectation from stakeholder in terms of communication? What do you need to communicate? Okay, and what is the escalation process in case of escalation required? What, and typically people also put levels of escalation. If you're not able to leave first level stakeholder, who is the next level stakeholder to escalate, right? Levels of escalation will be in your communication plan. Okay, why do we need to communicate? Yes, Saujanya has given an example. Status, progress, milestones, absolutely, they need to be communicated as well. Why do you need to communicate? How frequently? When do you need to communicate? Who will communicate, right? Some communication goes from team, some communication goes from project manager to stakeholders. You need to define all that. What methods will you use? Who will receive the communication, right? This will all you will plan, and your plan will translate to something like this. If you have to put it in a more readable format, for example, project kickoff will happen once in a project life cycle. Project manager is responsible, and he will involve sponsors and senior stakeholders. Executive steering committee once in a month. Project manager will drive it, and project manager and steering committee will be the audience. Status meeting, right? Weekly, project manager, almost all the stakeholders. Newsletter, weekly, team lead sends it to entire department. Daily stand up, project team daily, right? So this is a simple example. You may have many more meetings, but if you put it in an Excel sheet, communication plan like this, it is easy for you to organize communication. Okay, and then PMBOK 7 has something called models, methods, and artifacts. Now, for every performance domain, you will have different models that are applicable, methods that are applicable, and artifacts that are applicable. The model is more or less like an input, right? A strategy or what kind of method you are going to use to apply the strategy. Your model is the input. Okay, and then method is a tool or technique. Okay, what tool or technique you will apply, and what model will run on the method, and what output you will get is an artifact. In project management, artifacts are very important because they're typically proof of certain activity in the project. Right. So if you look at it, stakeholder has these models, right? Communication models, right? Change models, like for example, 8-step process for leading change, Carter's theory of change, right? Now, if you want to introduce change into an organization, typically humans are resistant to change unless they are compelled to do that, right? So there is a technique for introducing change in organization, a proper procedure how you can buy change from an organization, right? So that is a model, right? And there are other models like stakeholders are people, right? When you're in people and organizations, right? When you're dealing with them, you need people skills like conflict management, negotiation skills, right? Salience model, which we looked at. All these come under models. Now, what kind of methods can you use? We use some of them. Stakeholder analysis. We talked about that. We can apply meetings and events to interact with stakeholders. For agile projects, we have backlog refinement. When you are bidding for external vendors, external stakeholders like service providers, suppliers, contractors, we have bidder conferences. Again, in agile projects, we have sprint review, sprint planning. This is where stakeholders come together and there is a engagement point where they are briefed on the status of the project. Project kickoff, beginning of the project, lessons learned, release planning. These are various methods that are applicable, right? Your steering committee is a good place to sync up on high level status of the project, right? Typically from customers, you would use a net promoter score. Like you might be getting surveys on your feedback surveys on your product, right? Their net promoter score and prioritization of requirements. This is where stakeholders are brought in together. They are engaged and they get information. Now, finally, output is artifacts, right? So what artifacts are, impacted by or can impact stakeholder performance domain? Strategy artifacts like business case, project charter, and project vision. Even your roadmap in agile projects, for that matter, are artifacts that can engage stakeholders. Various logs and registers, like stakeholder register itself is a register. Plans, particularly communication management plan and stakeholder engagement plan. Okay, they influence stakeholders. And then other charts like your org structure. We saw stakeholder engagement matrix as an example. Contracts or agreements that you're signing, they're artifacts that can bind or engage stakeholders. Activities in your project, schedule activities, user stories, right? Nothing but lowest level of requirements. Above that, you may have epics or features in agile project, but user stories are typically engaging stakeholders. Okay, now before I open up for question and answer, right? Like we spoke, stakeholder is an important performance domain. We are dealing with wider section of people when it comes to stakeholder management, right? When you say people management, we always talk about people within your team, but stakeholder management, you are increasing your scope as a project manager to typically manage a larger set of people. Okay, project is successful when it achieves its objectives and meets or exceeds the expectations of the stakeholder. Now, understanding the key stakeholders, their interest, power, and needs, prioritizing them according to different criteria, and prepare the stakeholder engagement. Okay, creates additional value for the company, or more importantly, success of the project. Right? If you have to summarize this, understanding key stakeholders, right? Identifying stakeholders. From here to here, we're talking about analyzing stakeholders, and from here to here, they're talking about engaging stakeholders. Now, why do we need to do all of this? The success of the project. This is the summary and key takeaway. All right, so that was about stakeholder performance domain. Try to keep it brief and at the same time as much elaborate as possible. I would leave it open for questions from here. Any questions that strike your mind, any points to add from your experience, we can discuss this for the rest of the 10 minutes in this webinar. Go ahead, shoot your questions in the chat or in the call. I am ready.
Hi, Mr. Janagiram. Thank you for this presentation. This is Anand Srinivasan. So, just so you know, I just started prepping for this PMP exam, most so very recently, but I purchased a course from Udemy, and but it looks like it was primarily based on PMBOK 6 when it was originally authored and written. But um, uh, however, I was not aware at the time of purchase. However, the author seemed to be really a well prominent author, particularly in the project management space, and hence I went ahead and purchased it.
Mm,
And whatever you have spoken to, particularly in relation to the PMBOK 6 and 7 at the time of this beginning of this conversation, it really
mm,
makes sense to me. I'm wondering. So the question to you is, can I still continue to go through that course, that whatever that I purchased, that's primarily authored based on PMBOK
mm.
6 a while ago, back in I think early in 2021, and when it was originally authored, or even before that, because there were a lot of reviews about the course. It was really wonderful, and I also find it really interesting and pretty useful. So I
Mm.
just want to take your thoughts and inputs on this.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm pretty sure there are many others who have this question out there, right? Let me clarify with a single sentence. PMBOK 6th edition is still good for your PMP exam. Okay. Uh, Primary purpose of PMBOK, as I mentioned earlier, is to consolidate the best practices, standards, guidelines, principles in the industry, so that organizations can refer that for project management, right? And coincidentally, it happens to become one of the reference materials for PMP exam. So seventh edition was also created with that intention, and you see many agile related aspects coming up in seventh edition. But PMBOK sixth edition is still good for your PMP exam, unless the exam changes, which I don't think it will change for the next 2 years at least. Okay, so we are still good if it is authored based on sixth edition. Let me take an example. Whatever techniques we talked about, right? Analysis techniques, engagement techniques, communication plan, all these are still uh, mentioned in PMBOK sixth edition as well. Okay, it is just that the way they looked at project management changed, but under the hood many things remain the same. You're still good with sixth edition based book. You can continue to prepare. Now if you have PMI membership, you can download the seventh edition and go through it, right? Nothing stopping you from doing that. You can do that always.
Sure, Mr. Janagram. Thank you so much for this detailed explanation, because I was kind of having a
And
growing concern at the beginning of this conversation, but I think now I'm pretty clear and happy, and I'll continue with the same Janagram. Thank you.
when seventh edition was introduced, I was also equally confused, with later understood what was the purpose, right? It was pretty clear. Thank you. So Vikram has a question. How can project manager find project champions, right? Now, last 10 years, the way teams behave have changed. How people behave in a project team has also changed, right? We have millennials coming up as project. Now we have Gen Z people coming up as project team members. The way you manage people has also got to change. In today's world, you need to, when you say project champions, they're not individual contributors or best individual contributor anymore. Anyone who thinks and acts as per team goal rather than individual goal is a project champion. Okay, for example, if you take agile teams, they have sprint goals. They do not have individual goals, and all of them strive towards a sprint goal. Right? If one team member gets a story, if he's stuck in that, other team members will help him overcome that because they succeed together and fail together. Your project champions are those who realize and work together as a team, not as individuals. Okay, that is the way I look at it. With the way people are working differently today when it comes to project teams. Okay, hope that answered your question, Vikram. And Alam Mohammed Noor has a question. What is the best way to avoid conflict of interest between internal stakeholders and external stakeholders? This is always a challenge for project manager, right? Now, one thing that's important for a project manager is to never to take his eye away from the ball, right? Or not to take away his eye from the bottom line. The bottom line is the purpose and goals and objectives of the project. And believe me, as long as you understand the vision of the project and goals and objectives of the project, you can maneuver your discussion, your negotiation with various stakeholders easily. End of the day, you are there as a project manager for the project to succeed. Project is only successful when it reaches its goals and objectives, right? So if there is a conflict of interest, take the stand which run towards the project goals or objectives, and you need to convince the stakeholders that this decision is being taken towards the project goals and objectives. If that is clear for you, this resolving conflicts becomes easy for you, be it internal or external. Okay, there was an interview question that I got a couple of months back. I was asked, if you are a project manager, since you are coming from development background, who will you support in a conflict? Will you support developers or quality people? Now I said I will support those people whom the metrics support. The project metrics is supporting quality, I'll support quality. If the project metrics is supporting developer, I'll support developers, right? So your focus should be on project goals and objectives. With that, you'll be able to resolve these conflicts easily. Hope that answered your question. Any more questions from anyone?
Hi, Mr. Janagiram. This is Anand Srinivasan again. I have again a general question related to PMP itself. So, do we or does an individual really need a PMP to take up a deputy project manager or a project manager role within the same company or in a new organization? Because some of the folks that I see are still working towards PMP, or they may not even have an aspiration to go through PMP at all, but still work as a project manager in an organization that I have seen while looking at their LinkedIn profile. I know it's more of a personally centered question, so from my side, probably not precisely related to this topic of discussion, though, because the reason why I'm having this question is because my employer, based on my existing and past performance, it obviously seems like they want to take me into a management or a project manager role, so they are calling in for project management meetings along those lines. But I'm still in the very preliminary phase of PMP preparation, and I'm not sure when I will go through and get this done completely successfully. So I'm kind of also a little nervous, and that's why I just said that it's kind of a very personal question about me and where I'm in today, the situation. So if my employer is willing to offer a deputy project manager or project manager role in a new project, upcoming project, or can I still go ahead and ask for something even without having the PMP credential, and how to work through those things and negotiate with the employer and still let them know like I'm still a very trustworthy and reliable guy, even though I still do not have a PMP, or maybe even I would have failed my PMP in my first attempt, for example, because I'm not quite completely sure, because it's so overwhelming. I'm not sure when I will be done with this stuff.
Let's approach your question from other angle. Okay, your question, I'll answer it from the other angle. Why do we need PMP? I'll answer it from there. Let me be a bit philosophical here. Companies do not hire people, companies hire skill sets. Okay, today you are relevant. When I say you, I'm talking about everyone. Today people are relevant in their organization because they have the skill sets. Okay, now how do you prove you have a skill set? Particularly in management, it is very tricky, right? Technical skill sets, yes, you can assess, you may put them through assessment. Okay, even you have certifications for technical skill set, but management, project management, you need a credential to prove that you have skill set. There are many credentials out there. Why PMP is because, as I told you, PMI itself have been there for more than 50 years, 53 years, right? Concentrating on project management. So they have a consolidated best practices in project management in the industry that makes PMP unique and superior. And the numbers are proving it, right? Let's say new organizations looking for project managers, new project managers. They are asking PMP certification mandatorily today. 10 years back, if you have a PMP certification, it was a luxury. Today, it is mandatory if you're not PMP certified. Otherwise, how can they recognize that you have the skills, right? That is one aspect. Second aspect I've seen in my experience is 90% of the times, anyone within the organization gets PMP certified, they get promoted immediately. When I say immediately, between 3 to 6 months from there. That is my observation over a lot of people. Okay, so PMP is there to provide a proof that you have project management skills, and you need it in today's world. You need to prove that you have skills, right, before you get into a role. So even within your organization, outside the organization, you're going to benefit from PMP for sure.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Janagram. I think this has clearly answered my question and the next steps forward. Thank you so much again.
Welcome, Anand. Yeah.
By the way,
Alright.
one more follow-up, Mr. Janagram, before we hang up. Approximately on average, how much time do you think one can go through the preparation phase until they are done with, until they take the exam? What's the time frame to look at the preparation?
We recommend 2 months, considering 2 hours of preparation per day. It is a sweet spot to succeed the exam.
Okay, makes sense. Okay. Thank you.
Now, you may not be able to spend 2 hours every day. Maybe you can spend additional hours in the weekend and cover it up. That's how it worked for me. So Vikram mentioned, I did my PMP in 2012. It helped me understand the huge canvas of project management, which unfortunately an individual cannot cover in its professional life. Absolutely, right? That is a good point. If you being a project manager need not be exposed to all aspects of project management, no matter how long you work in the industry, right? Sometimes you need to be trained in order to cover those skill sets, right? So that's a good point from Vikram. I agree completely on that. Do you recommend, Saujanya is asking, do you recommend following a Udemy structured course for the PMP certification? I do not, for a reason. This is a professional certification, and I tell you, PMP is a difficult exam. If you compare with other project management certifications, PMP is a difficult exam. You better have a live instructor who can answer your questions rather than go through a Udemy course. I do not know. There are many courses in Udemy, I believe. I typically won't go to Udemy for any professional certifications. That is my personal opinion. I'm not trying to influence anyone, but it's up to you. I always want a live instructor who can clarify my questions for professional certifications. Right. So as I mentioned, sure. Is it preferable to take CAPM first, then PMP? If you are new to project management, go for CAPM. And you will be surprised to know that both of them cover the same syllabus, but CAPM exam is comparatively easier and then you can, it also carries good value for entry level project managers. Okay, if you are new, go for CAPM. If you have like more than 3 years of experience in project management, go for PMP. Now Techcanvass provides both CAPM prep course and PMP prep course. You can reach us at that contact email on the screen or phone number if you're interested. We provide both the course. For entry-level project managers, we provide CAPM. We groom them on project management fundamentals and basics. For experienced project managers, we cover the entire PMP syllabus. Okay, good. Now we have run out of time. I recommend you can put your questions on the YouTube under the video, or you can reach out to us in the email. If you're interested in knowing about the course, you can reach out to us on the numbers on the screen. And I wish you all good luck in your project management career. We'll again meet in the next webinar on the next performance domain.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for your time. Good questions, and goodbye.